Good morning, everyone. I'd love to add my welcome to the welcomes you've already received. It's great to be together, isn't it? Yes, we're looking at money, and I want to start by asking if you've ever thought about the things that Jesus didn't know. In his human nature, the things that Jesus, as a man on earth, didn't know. The list's actually quite long, but he didn't know about astrophysics. He couldn't speak French. I don't think he knew when Rome would fall, and certainly didn't know when the first iPhone would be released. But one thing that Jesus was an expert in was the human heart. The human heart was one of Jesus' specialist subjects. I think it would have been quite hard for his disciples to throw Jesus a surprise party, because he always saw beneath the surface, didn't he? If there was something going on in a heart, Jesus knew about it. And I think it's because Jesus knew so much about the human heart, and he knew it so well, that he talked so often about money. Now, Jesus wasn't on a fundraising campaign. He didn't come for anyone's money. He didn't need anyone's money. His father owned the cattle on 1,000 hills. He was after their hearts. He knew exactly how much the two, the human heart and money, could become entwined. And that Jesus is the same 2,000 years later. His heart towards us is the same. To all of us today, he would say, I didn't come for your money, I came for you. Jesus loves his church. He has betrothed himself to his church. So when he sees us lured away into lesser loves, he's not moved by anger, he's moved by compassion. And he comes and gets us. He comes and finds us and brings us back. This is a complicated time, ironic, to be talking about money. In this climate we find ourselves in, the cost of living crisis, the impact of Brexit, the effect of the war in Europe, these things have created uncertainty and instability for all of us, right? Recently, I was down in our food bank and I was talking to a woman who'd come in, and she was a little bit disorientated because she said, I never thought I would find myself here in this position. I've never been here before. I've never been to a food bank before. I'm not really sure what to do. She said that she'd been fine. She'd been coping. And then when the kind of cost of living crisis started, it tipped her over into struggling financially. And she was like, here I am. And that might not be your story today. It actually might be quite similar to your story. But for all of us, these crises have affected everyone. But I particularly want to address those of us for whom this feels particularly tricky. And maybe when Gus said, we're talking about money today, you're like, oh. If this is particularly painful for you, I'd love to start by inviting you to receive the kindness and the compassion of Jesus this morning. He's not here to rebuke us. He's here to set us free. He's not here to put heavy burdens on us or tell us to do more. He's come to give us a load that is light. And today we're going to look at how we can receive that light load of Jesus when it comes to the topic of money. We're going to look at that through what Paul writes to his friend Timothy in the book of 1 Timothy in chapter 6. So if you have your Bible with you, which I would strongly encourage, feel free to get it out, turn to 1 Timothy, or the words are going to appear here on the screen as well. And we're starting with verse 9. We're going to start with these two verses, but we won't finish here. So this is what Paul writes to Timothy. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evils. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. Now, I don't know how familiar these verses will be to you, but I guess there's one verse in here that maybe is quite familiar to you. I am, of course, talking about money is the root of all evil. Potentially one of the best-known verses in the Bible, quoted all the time in culture. Except there is just one small problem with this, isn't there? The verse that's well known is not actually what the verse says. Verse 10, some of you are like, please correct it. Verse 10 doesn't say money is the root of all evil. It says the love of money is the root of all kinds of evils. Now, why is this subtle distinction important? Aside from this opportunity of mine to correct a common misconception, which is a fun a hobby as that may be, it's important because Paul is not calling money the issue. He's saying love of money is the issue. So in other words, the problem is not out there, but in here. The danger is not out there, but in here. Money is out there. The love of money is here. Now, if I had a pet snake in a tank, maybe a boa constrictor or something, that wouldn't in itself be dangerous. A couple of people are, ooh. It would potentially be dangerous to my marriage. Because Tim is one of those people like, ooh. But a boa constrictor locked away in a tank is not going to harm me. If I took that boa constrictor out of the tank and cuddled up to it to go to sleep because Tim's moved out, then it might become dangerous, right? In the same way, having money in and of itself is not dangerous, but it's when we cuddle up to it, it's then we're in danger. And I think that's what Paul is warning us about in these passages. He's saying, in our lives, money can be exactly the same as that snake. Unless we have it tightly under lock and key, guarded in our lives, guarded by our hearts, the sneakiness and deceptiveness, like a snake, of the love of money will slither its way into our hearts, almost unnoticed, and trap us. In these verses, Paul is teaching Timothy how to help his church think about money, how to think about what approach they should have when they think about money. And do you notice the tone of these verses? Paul is really going out of his way here to describe the love of money as a very real danger and threat to the Christian life, as a sly enemy. Look at the warnings in this passage, the language he uses: temptation, snare, senseless and harmful desires, ruin, destruction, all kinds of evils, the language of craving, and saying that people have wandered away from the faith. You notice the sneakiness there. They've not been dragged away from the faith. They have wandered away from the faith because they've fallen into a snare. We know that a snare is not easily seen. The point is that it's concealed and it's hidden. So I hope at this point you at least feel a little bit convinced that Paul thinks the love of money is kind of a big deal. But if the love of money is such a big deal, maybe we should look for a second at what it actually is, because maybe it sounds quite straightforward on the surface, but no one actually loves the paper or the numbers on the screen, right? What we love is what that paper and what those numbers represent. What we love is the promises that those numbers give us, or that we believe that they make to us. And I think because it's sneaky, the love of money will say different things to different ones of us, depending on how we're wired and depending on the situation and the place in life that we find ourselves in. So to some of us in the room today, that snake will whisper in our ears that your truest joy is to be found not in what you have, but in what you don't yet have. It will say that the opportunity to be truly fulfilled and satisfied is waiting out there somewhere, just around the next corner. If only you just had a bit more money. It's saying that you would be that bit happier if you just had a bit more. It says that your satisfaction is waiting to be bought or acquired. If this is the way that the love of money would lie to you, then you'll be familiar with that pang Whenever you see or you think about a holiday you just can't afford, or a more spacious house, or the latest technology releases, for you, the love of money tells you that the life you've always wanted is just out of reach. Now, the rest of you might be thinking, oh, I'm off the hook today. Thanks for the warning, Paul, but I'm actually okay with this one, because I'm actually not a big spender. I'm actually very careful with money, and I like to save money, think carefully about what I give and what I save, and storing it up. Unfortunately, if that's you, you might not be off the hook either. Because I think there's another promise that the love of money would whisper to you. And this promise might be that money can offer you true security, peace, and certainty. Saving money is obviously a wise and necessary thing to do in lots of situations. But if we're not careful, the love of money can sneak in and begin to convince us that we provide for ourselves. That the thing really looking after us is our own ability to plan and earn and store up. Now, I would probably be more in the first category than the second, but I don't know what it would be for you. Either way, the root is the same. The love of money is about putting our faith in money to provide for us, to meet our deepest needs, whether those are needs for fulfillment and joy or peace and security. The heart that loves money is banking on money to provide rather than God. And if you're wondering, like, oh, I wonder if this is me or not, I think Paul's talking to everyone here. I think the danger is real for all of us. And when I fall into the trap of believing that money will provide those things for me, I think what's actually going on is I've believed another lie, an older lie told by another snake. Literally the oldest lie in history. So if you come with me just for a second, back to the Garden of Eden, we find another serpent cornering Eve and effectively saying to her, God is holding back from you. Saying, in telling you not to eat from that tree, God has kept from you true joy, true knowledge, satisfaction. And if you really want those things, you are going to have to reach out and take it for yourself, because God's not going to give those to you. It's the oldest lie in the book, and it's the lie at the root of the love of money. It means that I won't really trust God to give me what I need, so I will try and take it for myself. We know that when we find ourselves caught again, as we so often do, by this ancient lie, then we need to know and remember ancient truth again. Every good thing that we have is a gift from him. We heard some prayers about that actually in our worship, didn't we? Every good gift comes from him, not the work of our own hands. Our money, our jobs, our income, it's all a gift from him. I think there are some things that we so easily ascribe to the provision and goodness of God, right? The sunrise, we couldn't make that happen, so that's a provision from God. Or our promotion or our jobs, we've made that happen. There are some things that God gives me, and there are some things that I have given to myself or worked for myself. There are not some things that he gives us and other things that we give ourselves. Everything is provision from God. Your intelligence, your energy, your ideas, your aptitude at your job or your study or your money, all of it is gift. And knowing this frees us from the impossible burden of trying to provide for ourselves, being our own providers. It frees us from the love of money because it means I can now see money as from the hand of my provider rather than the provider itself. Paul says in another letter, what do you have that you did not receive? And behind every good gift is the gift that towers above every other. God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him will not perish, but have eternal life. When we needed a sacrifice for sin, God himself provided the lamb. The nails in his hands were the final nail in our attempts to turn anywhere else for security or joy or satisfaction. Where the allure of money promises security, here we find truest security as we are brought home to the Father. Where the allure of money promises joy, here we find that Jesus makes known to us the path of life, that in his presence there is fullness of joy. Where money would promise satisfaction, here we find that actually the water of the world will make us thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water that he gives will never thirst again. At the center of our faith is a free gift, not earned or worked for or achieved, and much more than provision to meet our basic needs. God has achieved for us every spiritual blessing in Jesus Christ. At his right hand are pleasures forevermore. And for those of us, maybe who find this easy to celebrate on a Sunday morning, but by Sunday night are wondering how we'll face the unknown challenges of tomorrow, financial or otherwise. He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things? At the cross of Christ, we find that in the end, love of money is deceitful because it cannot deliver what it promises. It numbs our hearts to the true source of everything we need, to the only place that lasting satisfaction can come. We find that love of money is not an alternative place to find joy or security because we were made for Jesus. And our hearts are restless until they find their rest in him. Jesus has created us to need and desire. It's not a design flaw that we are needy, that we long for satisfaction. He has created us that our hearts would be on a quest for true joy and satisfaction until we come home to him and find our deepest needs met in him. You might be pleased to know after hearing those verses at the beginning that Paul doesn't leave this conversation on money there. While he's depicted a life of what, or a picture of what a life deceived by the love of money looks like in those verses, now he's going to paint a picture of what a life free from the love of money might look like. So if we turn again to 1 Timothy 6, and this is from 17. As for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share, thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is truly life. This is good news now, because here in these verses we see that God is not telling us to want less. He's not telling us to settle. He is inviting us to let go of that which cannot satisfy, to take hold of that which is truly life. We might have expected in our sinful hearts this passage to say, charge them not to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who demands that we desire less, who tells us to let go of our desires, on God who rebukes us for wanting to know enjoyment or pleasure. No, it says on God who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. How easily in our sinful hearts we can read God's instruction to be content and turn it into translate it into an instruction to settle for not being satisfied. to use your willpower to just become okay with not having your desires met. Suck it up, stiff upper lip, let's just get on with it. But here we see contentment in God is all about abundance, not lack. In this passage, Paul is asking us to want more, not less. See, he tells us to seek to be rich, but in good works. He instructs us to store up treasure. We see then that instinct to store things up and to work towards treasure is not sinful, but to put it in heaven, not on earth. He tells us to reach out and take hold of something, but not the fruit that we grasp for ourselves, but that which is truly life, which he offers. He's telling us here that fleeing from the love of money is about knowing more security, because he tells people not to set their hope on the uncertainty of riches. And I think riches can make us feel secure. It can give us the illusion of security. But he's saying there's a deeper security for all of us than the riches this world could offer. Because when we turn from what this world can offer to Jesus, we find ourselves in the company of the God of abundance. Look at Jesus, the heart of Jesus in this invitation to feast and enjoy him in Isaiah 55. He says, "Come, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. And he who has no money, come buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without price. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which does not satisfy? Listen diligently to me and eat what is good, and delight yourselves in rich food." Jesus' call is to everyone who thirsts, which is, of course, all of us, and to anyone who would recognize their hunger and their need. He says, come. Come and feast. Come and enjoy. Come and be satisfied. Truest joy and satisfaction isn't waiting around the next corner. It's right here in the heart of Jesus. This is a picture of a king who has set on a magnificent banquet and flung wide the gates, the doors, so that anyone can come in and enjoy. And there's no cost, there's no price to pay, because he's paid for it all himself. When we put our love and our trust in money, or what this world can offer, we are like people who are invited by that king to come to this feast, but who instead choose to sit on the steps of the palace and eat scraps. Our copper coins can only buy us crumbs that will not fill us up, but the free gift of grace, paid for by the blood of Jesus on that cross, is a banquet of his goodness. Our hearts were not made for finite things or for finite loves. We're not made for the accumulation of money or stuff. Our hearts were made for our Maker, and it's only in his beauty and love that we will find satisfaction and joy that money promises but can never deliver. Ecclesiastes 5 says, "He who loves money will never be satisfied with money." And today he would look us each in the eye and say, please don't settle for stale bread when an eternal banquet of joy is offered to you. So, now what? Because I know we can't all leave church today and give away all our money, sell everything we have, and live the rest of our lives in reckless financial abandon. It would not be my recommendation. We need money. We need things. And as we saw earlier, money itself is not a problem. Money is a gift. And it can be a tool for the kingdom of God. But as we've seen, it's a matter of keeping watch of our hearts. Money will either hinder us in our discipleship to Jesus in a way that will cause us to wander, or it will be a tool for the kingdom that points to the sufficiency and satisfaction only found in Jesus. Every time we open our wallet, it's one or the other. So how should we approach money with a kingdom mindset? I think at this point, we want some rules, right? And especially some of us more than us, like, just tell me what to do, and I'll do that. Unfortunately, sometimes we want rules because just doing what we're told is slightly easier than genuine heart change, right? Here's an analogy I've heard about this I find really helpful. So there's two football coaches, and the first coach says to his team, right, I want you to love this team with all your heart and your mind and your strength and your soul. I want you to think about this team when you wake up. I want you to give yourself to this team. And then the second coach says, right, I've put together the strictest regime to get us to the trophy. Should have thought about that. A FA Cup or something. To get us there. And here's what we're going to do. It's a 7-day training regime. Here's your diet. Here's your lifestyle. Here's what you can't eat. Can't see your friends anymore. You're going to be here every day. Which coach has set the higher bar? Think that when we often want rules, what we actually find that Jesus is asking us to give him our hearts. So before I finish today, to help us think about how we can love Jesus with all our heart and soul and mind, here are just some questions which can help us examine our hearts when it comes to money. Maybe you want to take these questions away and think about them, maybe talk about them with a friend or with your partner. What does my spending and saving and giving say about where my truest joy is found? How could I seek the kingdom more in the way that I use money? And does my spending and saving and giving reflect my devotion to Jesus' church? Some things to reflect on as we kind of work out what's going on in our hearts in this area. When we keep coming back to the waters that never run dry in the heart of God, our grip on money is increasingly freed. It's no longer the thing we want to satisfy us, so we're free to be generous. It doesn't matter so much anymore. But all of this is about coming to the heart of Jesus, right? Not about working things up in our hearts or trying really hard to be more disciplined. I think it's about knowing Jesus more. So as we worship now, and maybe I can invite you up, I would love us to focus on that invitation of Jesus to come and feast, to come and enjoy him. And I know that the things of this world grow strangely dim as we do that. I'd love to just read that invitation from Isaiah again for us. Maybe you could stand where you are if you're able to. This is Jesus' invitation to us this morning. Come, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. And he who has no money, come and buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without price. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which does not satisfy? Listen diligently to me and eat what is good, and delight yourselves in rich food.